My name is Claire Whitman, and I'm 35 years old. 3 days ago, my husband disappeared for the entire weekend. No calls, no texts, no, hey, I'm alive, don't worry. His side of the bed stayed cold Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. And then Monday morning, he walked through the front door like he'd just come back from a jog instead of vanishing for 72 hours. Before that weekend, if you'd looked at our life on paper, you'd probably have said something neat and tidy like, they're fine, they're stable, they've got it figured out. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 5. We met through mutual friends at a barbecue, one of those sticky summer afternoons where someone's always burning the burgers and the cheap beer tastes like water. Ethan made some dumb joke about my interview voice when I introduced myself, and I remember rolling my eyes and laughing in spite of myself. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. The first years of our marriage were good. Not fairy tale perfect, but solid. We had routines, Wednesday night takeout, Sunday morning coffee runs, stupid inside jokes no one else would understand. We talked about maybe buying a cabin someday, maybe a dog, maybe kids, once our careers stabilized. We weren't some Instagram couple with matching outfits and choreographed videos. We were normal, comfortable. And then, about 6 months ago, something shifted. It started small. He began working late more often. This project is insane right now, he'd say, loosening his tie, dropping his laptop bag by the door. We're under a lot of pressure. At first, I believed him. I know what a crunch season looks like. But late nights turned into later nights, working Saturdays. Last-minute drinks with coworkers that started at 9 p.m. and stretched into the early hours. His phone, which had always been an abandoned rectangle on the coffee table, suddenly grew attached to his palm. One Tuesday, I reached for it without thinking, just to check the time, and the screen flashed locked with a new 6-digit code. "When did you put a passcode on your phone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He shrugged, not looking up from the TV. "Work stuff. We're tightening security. They told us to." It was a flimsy excuse. I work in an environment where security actually means something, and no one has ever told me to hide my phone from my spouse. But I let it go, or tried to. Whenever I asked about his day, his answers shrank. Fine. Busy. Exhausted. I'd push a little, anything interesting happen? And he'd sigh, like I'd just dumped a stack of forms in his lap. "Claire, I'm wiped. Can we not do a debrief every night?" The first time he said it, I apologized. The third time, I started hearing the subtext. I don't want to let you in anymore. I tried to fix it. I suggested we take a weekend away. I suggested counseling. I told him I felt like he was on another planet and I was waving at him from a distance. He'd run a hand through his hair, look everywhere but at me, and say, "We're fine. You're overthinking again. You're always in your head." When I mentioned counseling the second time, he laughed. "We don't need a stranger telling us how to talk. I just need some space, Claire, that's all." That word, space, became his favorite answer. Didn't want to have dinner together? He needed space. Didn't want to talk about why he'd come home at 1:30 a.m. smelling like perfume I didn't own? He needed space. Spent 3 hours locked in the bathroom with his phone, the fan humming to cover his voice? He needed space. I'm not stupid. I knew something was wrong. I knew something was cracking beneath the glossy photo of our life. But I wanted to trust the man I'd married. I wanted to believe that maybe he was stressed or depressed or going through some weird private storm that had nothing to do with me. I wanted to believe we were still on the same team. Then came this past Friday. I got home from work around 6. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan's car wasn't in the driveway, but that wasn't unusual anymore. I kicked off my shoes, microwaved leftovers, put on a show I wasn't really watching, and texted him around 8. "Hey, what time are you home?" No response. At 9, I called, straight to voicemail. At 10, I tried again. Same thing. By 11, my skin felt too tight. I texted his best friend, Dylan. "Hey, have you heard from Ethan?" He's not answering. Dylan replied quickly. "Nah, haven't seen him since Tuesday. You okay?" I lied. "Yeah, just checking." I called another one of his buddies. No one had heard anything. I called his mother, trying to sound casual. "Hi, Linda. Quick question. Has Ethan mentioned any plans for tonight? I can't get a hold of him." There was a pause on the line. "No, honey. I haven't talked to him in a few days. Is everything all right?" "I'm sure it's fine," I said, lying again. "He's probably just busy." I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my brain replayed the worst possible scenarios on loop. Car accidents, hospitals, dark roads, and, quieter but more persistent, the image of him laughing in some dimly lit bar with a woman who wasn't me. Saturday morning, I woke up to exactly 0 missed calls and 0 messages. I stared at my phone, at the empty notification bar, swallowing down panic and anger that tasted exactly the same in my throat. I called his phone. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. Again, voicemail. By midday, I could not take it anymore. I drove to his office, locked and dark for the weekend. I checked the gym he liked, the coffee shop where he caught up on emails, the bar he swore he only went to for team outings. Nothing. By the time I walked into the police station, my hands were shaking so badly I had to lace my fingers together just to keep them still. The officer at the desk listened while I explained everything. My husband hadn't come home, his phone was off, no one had heard from him. This wasn't like him, except of course it was becoming exactly like him. Have you two had any recent arguments? The officer asked, typing into a computer. We've been having problems, I admitted. He's been distant, working late, but nothing that would make him just disappear. Is his car missing? I hesitated. I hadn't actually checked. I don't know. I just assumed he drove it wherever he went. Why don't you check, ma'am? He said gently. Call us back if it's gone. I drove home in a daze, walked into the garage, and felt my stomach drop. His car wasn't there. Back at the station, the officer listened as I updated him. He asked if any of his belongings were missing. I went home again and checked. Some clothes were gone, his overnight bag, his toiletry kit, the nice cologne he only wore on special occasions. When I went back and told the officer, he gave me this look. That slow, pitying look that says he already knows the ending of your story and wishes he didn't have to be the one to spoil it. Ma'am, he said, it doesn't sound like he's missing. It sounds like he left. He wouldn't just leave without telling me, I snapped, the words a little too loud. People do, he said quietly. Give it a few days. He'll probably turn up. I walked out feeling like I'd been slapped, like I was the punchline to a joke I hadn't realized we were telling. Maybe I was. Saturday night, the house felt cavernous. Every sound was amplified, my footsteps, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop, the cursor blinking in an empty browser window. Then, with a kind of cold, shaking clarity, I opened our bank account. I told myself I was being responsible, that I just needed to see if there were any suspicious charges in case someone had stolen his card. That's what I told myself as I clicked through statements, even though my heart already knew what it was looking for. It didn't take long. 2 weeks ago, a charge at a downtown hotel I'd never heard of, $347. My pulse roared in my ears. 3 weeks before that, another hotel, different name, $289. Soon I wasn't breathing, just scrolling. 4 hotel charges in the last 3 months, all downtown, all on nights he'd worked late or gone out with the guys. My hand hovered over the trackpad, trembling. I stared at the numbers on the screen, at the dates, at the quiet, neat line items that casually documented the implosion of my marriage. Sunday morning, after a sleepless night and 1,000 worst-case scenarios, I made a decision. I was done guessing what my husband was doing. I was going to find out. Sunday afternoon, I found myself sitting in a corner booth of a quiet coffee shop, hands wrapped around a cup I wasn't drinking. The private investigator slid into the seat across from me, like he'd done this 1,000 times, which I guess he had. He was older, maybe mid-50s, with tired eyes, and a no-nonsense manner that made me feel both exposed and protected at the same time. You must be Claire, he said, offering a small, steady nod. I handed him a folder packed with printed bank statements, highlighted dates, and a picture of Ethan I'd taken last year at our anniversary dinner. In the photo, Ethan was smiling, warm, relaxed. The version of him I'd been hoping still existed under the cold wall he'd built these last few months. I'm not exactly proud of this, I murmured, pushing the papers toward him. But I don't know what else to do. You'd be surprised how often I hear that, he said gently. He spread the documents across the table, scanning with the kind of focus that comes from habit. Hotel charges, frequency, pattern, car info, photo, all right. He closed the folder, folded his hands, and met my eyes. I can't promise how fast this will go, he warned. Could be hours, could be days. Depends on if he shows up anywhere public. I understand. Once he surfaces, if he's with someone, I'll document it. I nodded, feeling something inside me harden. Resolve or heartbreak, I wasn't sure. Maybe both. I signed the retainer, $1,500 to buy the truth. When I got back home, the house felt unbearably still. My footsteps echoed in that quiet space, pressing against my ribs like the silence itself was accusing me of something. I spent the rest of Sunday waiting, pacing, pretending I could distract myself with laundry or cleaning or cooking, none of which worked. My phone stayed glued to my hand, and every buzz, every vibration made my heart jump into my throat. But there was nothing from Ethan, nothing from the PI, just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock mocking me. By midnight, I had the lights off, the curtains drawn, and I was lying awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I checked my phone every 5 minutes, convinced I'd missed something. Nothing. Around 2 in the morning, after maybe 20 minutes of broken sleep, my phone lit up with a new email notification. Private investigator. I sat up so fast my vision blurred. My hands shook as I opened the email, and the first line punched all the air out of my lungs. He surfaced. Below that was a link to a secure folder. I clicked it. The first photo was timestamped Friday, 4:17 p.m. Ethan, getting out of his car in the parking lot of a downtown hotel. His overnight bag slung over his shoulder. The second photo, Friday, 4:24 p.m. Ethan walking through the sliding doors of the lobby with a woman beside him. A woman with long dark hair, a fitted blazer, and a smile I recognized without wanting to. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating her face. Madison Blake, Ethan's ex-girlfriend, the one he always brushed off whenever I brought her up. The past, he'd said. Barely even dated. You're reading into things, Claire. My mouth went dry. The third photo nearly broke me. Friday, 4:31 p.m. Ethan kissing Madison in the hotel lobby. It wasn't a friendly peck. It wasn't a goodbye. It was the kind of kiss you give someone you've been thinking about all day. My hands clenched around the phone so tightly I felt the case digging into my palms. But I kept scrolling. Photo after photo. Saturday morning. Them leaving together. Saturday brunch at a cafe. Saturday afternoon. Going back to the hotel. Sunday morning. Leaving again. Together. Each timestamp was like a tiny knife, precise and deliberate. And through it all, Ethan didn't look stressed. He didn't look lost or overwhelmed or confused. He looked happy. Happy in a way he hadn't looked with me in months. The message from the PI below the photos was clinical. Documented per request. Public settings. No privacy laws violated. More available if needed. I stared at the images until my eyes stung, until the world blurred into one shapeless smear of betrayal and disbelief. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, waiting for morning, feeling something inside me crystallize. A kind of cold clarity. At 7:43 a.m., I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. There it was. Ethan's car. My heart didn't race this time. My hands didn't shake. Instead, I felt empty, calm, like I'd stepped outside my body and was watching everything happen from a safe distance. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting as he unlocked the front door, dropped his bag, and walked inside. He came around the corner, saw me sitting there, and didn't even startle. "Morning," he said casually, like he'd just gotten back from the gym. I looked at him, at his slightly rumpled clothes, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the mild annoyance in his eyes, and something clicked into place. "Where were you?" I asked, voice steady. "Out." "Out where?" I pressed. "For an entire weekend? Without answering your phone, without returning a single message?" He gave an exaggerated sigh, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Claire, I needed to clear my head." 3 days. He'd been gone for 3 days. "You needed to clear your head," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "I filed a missing person report, Ethan," I said quietly. "I thought you were dead in a ditch somewhere." He rolled his eyes. Actually rolled his eyes. "That's dramatic. Obviously I'm fine." "You didn't answer your phone for 72 hours. My phone died." "For 3 days?" "I forgot my charger," he snapped. "You couldn't borrow one? You couldn't call me from the hotel phone?" He froze for half a heartbeat, a tiny pause, a slip. Then he shook it off and reached for a mug. "You're being really controlling right now," he muttered, pouring himself coffee. "Controlling," I echoed. "I was worried about you." "You filed a police report because I took a weekend for myself. That's controlling." My pulse steadied, my breathing slowed. It was almost shocking how calm I felt. "Where were you?" I asked again. He turned to face me, leaning back against the counter, mug in hand. "You don't need to know where I go." That was it. The moment every last piece of doubt inside me died. I stood up from the table slowly, walked to the home office, and returned with the folder I'd printed. I set it on the counter in front of him. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it." He set down his coffee, opened the folder, and flipped to the first page. Ethan in the hotel parking lot. Friday, 4:17 p.m. His expression didn't change. Next photo. Ethan and Madison walking into the lobby. Friday, 4:24 p.m. His jaw tightened. Next, the kiss. Friday, 4:31 p.m. His confidence cracked like glass. "Where did you get these?" he asked, voice suddenly thin. "A private investigator," I said. "I hired him Sunday." Ethan kept flipping through the photos, him and Madison together all weekend, his breathing turning shallow. "This is illegal," he tried. "It's not," I said simply. "You were in public. No expectation of privacy." He shut the folder sharply. "It's not what it looks like. It looks like you spent the weekend at a hotel with your ex-girlfriend. We're just friends." "Friends who kiss in hotel lobbies?" It was a goodbye kiss. "Goodbye," I repeated. It lasted 11 seconds. There's a timestamp. His hands shook. "You're twisting everything," he snapped. "Who is she to you?" "No one, a coworker." "What's her name?" "That's not important." "It is to me," I said, "considering you spent a weekend with her while I was searching hospitals." His mug slammed onto the counter, coffee splashing white cabinets. "You want the truth?" he shouted. "Fine. I've been seeing her for 3 months. I needed time to think. I took this weekend to figure out what I want." "And?" I asked. He swallowed. "I don't know yet." I looked at the man I had built a life with. The man who had lied, vanished, betrayed, and now couldn't choose between me and the woman he'd already chosen. Something inside me went perfectly still. "Get out," I said softly. "What?" "Get out of my house." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "Claire, don't be ridiculous," he said finally, laughing without any humor. "This is our house." "No," I replied. "It's my house. My name is the only one on the mortgage. I bought it before we got married. You know that." He set his jaw, the same way he did when he was about to dig in out of pure stubbornness. "That doesn't mean you can just kick me out," he said. "We're married. You don't get to make unilateral decisions like this because you're upset." "Upset?" I repeated quietly. "You disappeared for 3 days with your ex-girlfriend, and you're still not sure if you want to stay married to me. I'm not upset, Ethan. I'm done." His eyes narrowed, searching my face for any sign that this was a bluff, a tantrum, some temporary flare of anger he could wait out. He didn't find one. "You're overreacting," he said. "People make mistakes. That's what couples therapy is for. You're just proving my point about you being intense and controlling." I remembered every time he'd called me paranoid when I knew something was wrong. Every time he'd told me I was overthinking while he was out building a second life behind my back. The word controlling didn't even sting anymore. It just sounded lazy. "You had your chance to go to counseling," I said. "I suggested it months ago. You said we didn't need it." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "You didn't want help, Ethan," I continued. "You wanted me to stop asking questions." He looked away first. "That doesn't change the fact that you can't just force me out of my own home," he said, his voice harder now. "I've been paying into this place for years. I have rights." "You can talk to a lawyer about your rights," I said. "Right now, I want you out." "This is insane." "What's insane," I replied, "is you thinking I'd just live with this. You don't get to vanish with another woman and then stroll back in here like you took a spa weekend." He scoffed, but there was a tremor under it. "You've got 1 hour," I said. "Pack whatever you need. Clothes, toiletries, whatever paperwork you can carry. After that, I'm changing the locks." His nostrils flared. "You wouldn't." I held his gaze. 1 hour, Ethan." For a long beat, we just stared at each other, the air between us thick with 7 years' worth of history and a weekend's worth of truth. Then he broke it with a bitter laugh. "Fine," he said. "If this is how you want to play it, don't say I didn't try." He grabbed his suitcase from the hallway closet, stomped down the hall to our bedroom, and began yanking clothes off hangers. I followed him to the doorway but didn't step inside. I just leaned against the frame, watching. "This is a mistake," he muttered, as he stuffed shirts, jeans, socks into the suitcase without folding. "You're throwing away a marriage over a rough patch." "A rough patch," I said softly. "That's what you're calling 3 months of lying and a weekend at a hotel with Madison." He slammed a drawer shut. "You act like you're perfect," he shot back. "Like you never did anything wrong. You're exhausting, Claire. Everything is always a crisis with you. I needed a break." "So you took a vacation from our vows," I said. "Got it." He stopped packing long enough to meet my eyes. For a second, I saw something almost like regret flicker there, but it vanished just as quickly, smothered by anger and pride. "You're going to regret this," he said. "Once you calm down and realize what you've done, you're going to want to talk, and I'll be gone." "I'm counting on it," I replied. He shook his head in disbelief, tossed a handful of chargers and cables into his bag, and moved to the bathroom. I watched him sweep his razor, toothbrush, cologne, and hair products into a toiletry kit with jerky, frustrated movements. Once he had one suitcase zipped and bulging, he grabbed another from under the bed and filled it more slowly. this time with the things that mattered to him. A couple of framed photos, his favorite jacket, the watch his dad had given him, a stack of notebooks from work. Some traitorous part of me wanted to cry watching him pack his life into 2 suitcases, but the larger, colder part remembered the hotel photos and the way he'd said, "You don't need to know where I go." So I didn't cry. At 9:47 a.m., Ethan wheeled both suitcases to the front door. He set them down and turned back to me. "This doesn't have to be the end," he said, his voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. "We can fix this. We can talk. Just tell the lawyer you overreacted and you want to try counseling first." "I suggested counseling when you first pulled away," I reminded him. "You told me I was being dramatic." "That was before," he said. "I was confused. I needed space," I finished for him. "You needed space." His mouth flattened. "I'm not confused anymore," I said. "I know exactly what I want." His eyes searched my face one last time. When he didn't find what he was looking for, he shook his head, picked up his suitcases, and stepped out onto the porch. "You're heartless," he said, bitterness sharpening every syllable. "I hope you enjoy being alone." I looked past him at the empty street. "I already was," I replied. I closed the door. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the knob, listening to the wheels of his suitcases rattle down the walkway, the car door open and slam, the engine turn over and fade away. Then I exhaled. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for months. By 2:00 p.m., the locks were changed. The locksmith didn't ask questions. I signed the receipt with a steady hand and watched him drive away, then turn the new key in the door. Just to feel it, to hear the subtle click that meant he couldn't walk in here whenever he felt like it anymore. At noon, my phone started lighting up. First, Ethan's mother. 4 missed calls in 20 minutes. I let them all go to voicemail. Then his sister Jenna. "You need to calm down and talk to him like an adult. He's trying to call you. Answer your phone. You're being cruel, Claire." I stared at the screen for a moment, then blocked her number. Cruel. Was it cruel to refuse to be cheated on quietly? Was it cruel to stop offering my home and my life to someone who'd already chosen a backup? At 3:07 p.m., my phone rang again. This time an unfamiliar number. "Hello? Ms. Whitman, this is Robert, your investigator." My spine straightened. "I heard from my associate that your husband left the house with luggage this morning," he said. "Just wanted to confirm and see if you're satisfied with the investigation." I looked around at the living room, still littered with the ghost of his presence, his blanket draped over the arm of the couch, his shoes by the door, the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the hallway. "Yes," I said, "you gave me exactly what I needed. Thank you. I'll send over the final invoice and keep the full file, photos, timestamps, in a secure folder," he said. "If you decide to use them for legal purposes, your attorney can contact me directly." "I will," I said. "I'm filing for divorce." There was a brief pause, the kind that carries more empathy than words. "I'm sorry it turned out this way," he said quietly. "Yeah," I replied. "Me too." After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. Divorce attorney near me. I clicked the first few results, quickly ruling out anyone who looked flashy or gimmicky. I wanted someone who looked boring and lethal, like they spent their free time reading tax code for fun. I found a woman whose bio was 3 sentences long and included phrases like equitable distribution and complex marital assets. No inspirational quotes, no soft focus headshots. Perfect. I called the office. The receptionist scheduled a consultation for Wednesday morning. "Bring any documentation you have," she said. "Bank records, property information, anything that might be relevant." My eyes flicked to the folder on the counter. "I have documentation," I said. The rest of Monday passed in a strange, muted fog. I went through the motions like I was following an emergency checklist. Change account passwords, remove his name from online banking, cancel the shared credit card, unlink his email from our streaming services, log out his profile on every device. Little things, yes, but each click, each deletion, felt like pulling one more thread out of the life we'd woven together. Sometime near dusk, as the sky turned that bruised gray blue and shadows stretched across the living room, headlights washed over the front of the house. I glanced through the peephole. Ethan's car. He got out alone this time and walked up to the door, shoulders squared like he was marching into a meeting he planned to dominate. The doorbell rang, then came the knocking. "Claire, open the door," he called. "We need to talk." I sat on the couch and stared at the door. The ringing continued, so did the knocking. My phone lit up with his name. I declined the call. He called again. I declined again. After a few more minutes of pounding, the noise stopped. I watched through the peephole as he stalked back to his car, yanked the door open, and drove away. I let my head fall back against the couch, breathing out slowly. An hour later, the headlights returned. This time, there were 2 cars. I didn't need to look to know who was with him. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan standing on the porch again, this time flanked by his mother, Linda. She was wearing a long cardigan, her purse clutched to her chest like a shield, her expression already tight with judgment. The knocking started immediately. Not frantic, but firm, insistent. "Claire," Linda called. "We know you're home. Open the door, sweetheart. We need to talk about this." I didn't move at first. I just stood behind the door, watching them like I was watching a scene through glass. More knocking. Finally, I unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door open just enough that they could see my face, but not enough for either of them to step inside. Linda exhaled with relief. "Thank God. Claire, honey, what's going on? Ethan said you threw him out." "He told you why?" I asked, voice neutral. "He told me you're upset and not thinking clearly," Linda said. "That you two had a disagreement and you overreacted." "A disagreement," I repeated blankly. Ethan lifted his chin, refusing to look away. "Claire, can we talk inside? Just 5 minutes." "No," I said instantly. Linda's eyebrows pulled together. "Claire, this is your husband. You can't just shut him out of the house like this. You two need to speak privately. Come on, let us in." "You're not coming in," I said, steady and calm. "This isn't a discussion. This is a boundary." Ethan scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" My laugh came out soft, almost disbelieving. "You disappeared for 3 days with your ex-girlfriend." Linda's mouth fell open. She turned sharply toward her son. "Ethan, what is she talking about?" He clenched his jaw. "Mom, she's twisting things." "She's not," I cut in before he could spin another story. "I have photos, timestamps, receipts. I filed a missing person report. Your son spent the weekend with Madison Blake." Linda looked stunned, hurt, embarrassed, her face pulling in several directions at once. "Ethan, tell me this isn't true." He didn't answer. His silence was the only answer she needed. "Oh my God," Linda whispered. "Ethan." He shook his head, defensive. "It's not as simple as she's making it sound. Claire has been impossible lately. She's intense, she's paranoid, she micromanages every little—" "Ethan," I said quietly, "stop talking about me and start talking about what you did." He flinched, not visibly, but internally. I could see it. His shoulders stiffened. He swallowed. Linda put a hand to her chest. "Claire, marriages go through difficult times. Couples make mistakes. They work through them." I met her gaze evenly. "I suggested counseling months ago. He refused." Linda's face fell. "He was already cheating," I said simply. "He didn't want counseling. He wanted me to stop asking where he was." Ethan glared at me like I'd betrayed him, which was almost surreal. Linda tried again, voice shaky but firm. "Claire, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. You can't just throw away a marriage over one mistake." "One mistake?" I repeated, incredulous. "He didn't trip and fall into an affair. He made choices, multiple choices, over months." Her eyes drifted to the ground. "Still, surely you two can sit down and talk this through." "No," I said. And this time, the word felt like a steel door locking into place. "I'm not negotiating with someone who lied to my face and then told me I didn't need to know where he goes." Ethan's jaw tightened. Linda frowned, confused and flustered. "Claire, please." "I'm filing for divorce," I said, clear and final. "We're done." Linda's face crumpled. "But Claire—" "Good night, Linda." And before either of them could argue, I closed the door. Their voices filtered through the wood for another minute, knocking, pleading, Ethan eventually cursing under his breath, but I didn't open it again. Eventually, they left. Wednesday morning, I sat in an office with crisp white walls and shelves lined with thick legal volumes. My attorney, Margaret Hale, was composed, middle-aged, with sharp eyes, and a voice that suggested she'd spent decades cutting through people's excuses for a living. She skimmed through the folder I brought. Financial statements, the PI report, the printed photos, marking certain pages with yellow tabs. "This is very clear evidence, Jay," she said. "Documented infidelity, premarital ownership of the house, no children. This will be straightforward." I felt tension loosen in my shoulders. Finally, someone who wasn't telling me I was dramatic, intense, paranoid, or impossible. Margaret asked about assets, savings, property records, joint accounts. I answered every question, some mechanically, some with a sting of humiliation. She took notes without judgment. "Do you want to pursue alimony?" she asked. "No," I said instantly. "I don't want anything from him. I just want this over." "He may ask for it," she said, tapping her pen. "He may claim financial dependence, contributions to the household, lifestyle maintenance." I shook my head. "Let him ask." Her eyes flicked up, approving. Good. Because in this state, adultery can severely affect alimony claims. And given the financial documents you have, he'd have a very weak case. A coil of relief unwound in my chest. I'll draft the papers, she said. You should have them by Friday. The papers were served at Ethan's mother's house Friday afternoon. I knew the moment it happened because my phone exploded with notifications. 17 calls in 30 minutes. I didn't answer a single one. Then came the text. We need to talk before you make a huge mistake. I replied once. Talk to your attorney. 5 seconds later, another incoming call. I blocked his number. The silence that followed was the calmest sound I'd heard in weeks. The following Wednesday, Margaret called. His attorney reached out, she said. They want to negotiate. Negotiate what? They're asking if you'd agree to split the equity in the house. 50-50. I stared at the phone like it had insulted me personally. Absolutely not, I said. The house was mine before the marriage. I paid 70% of the mortgage even after the wedding. I have the records. That's what I told them, she replied. They've countered with a request for 35% of the equity. I laughed loudly. He can't be serious. He's basing it on the claim that he contributed to home improvements. I sat up straighter. Home improvements? He bought a couch and painted the hallway once. That's what I have in my notes, Margaret said. So I offered 10%. And? They countered with 25. 15, I said immediately. That's as high as I'll go. There was a pause. Then Margaret said, I'll let them know. For the next 2 weeks, negotiations seesawed back and forth. Every email felt like peeling another layer off the mess Ethan had left behind. Finally, both attorneys confirmed a settlement. Ethan receives 15% of the equity in the home, joint savings split 50-50. Each keeps their own car. No alimony. Divorce final in 90 days. Clean, simple, fair in ways he didn't deserve. When I signed the packet, pen gliding in firm strokes across each page, I felt something shift. Not relief. Not closure. Something quieter. The slow unclenching of a fist I didn't realize I'd been making for months. The day after the settlement was official, I opened my front door to pick up a package and noticed something odd. For the first time in weeks, the air around the doorway didn't feel heavy. His shoes weren't there. His cologne wasn't in the hall. His shadow wasn't lingering behind every memory. For the first time since Ethan walked out with 2 suitcases, the house felt like mine again. 4 months passed. 4 months since Ethan walked in on a Monday morning with a casual morning, like he hadn't vanished for an entire weekend. 4 months since I handed him a folder full of photographs that stripped every lie bare. 4 months since I told him to get out. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. The papers were a thin, unimpressive stack, absurdly small, considering they represented the death certificate of a 7-year relationship. I hadn't spoken to him since the day he left with those suitcases. Every word afterward filtered through attorneys, through email attachments, through signatures and settlement terms. Clean, impersonal, cold. And I preferred it that way. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel guilty. Sometimes I wondered if people expected me to regret being so decisive. Sometimes I wondered if I should have given him one more conversation, one more chance to explain his reasons or ask for forgiveness. But every time that flicker of guilt or doubt crept in, I remembered the photo of him kissing Madison in the hotel lobby. 11 seconds. I had the timestamp. Any lingering softness evaporated right there. I slowly rebuilt my home. The first thing I did was strip the bedroom of anything Ethan had touched. The comforter, the pillows, the lamps. He insisted set the right mood. The framed art he picked out because he said it looked sophisticated. All of it gone. I bought soft white bedding, a warm oak nightstand, and a small reading lamp that glowed like candlelight. I opened the windows every morning to let the room breathe again. One afternoon, on a whim, I painted the living room a muted sage green, a color Ethan would have hated. He always preferred cold grays and dark blues because they looked minimalist and masculine. The new color warmed the whole space. I rearranged the furniture. I changed the curtains. I replaced the dining chairs with lighter, softer ones. Piece by piece, the house shed its old skin, the version of it that belonged to us, and grew into the version that belonged to me. And with every change, the air grew lighter. Through mutual friends, I learned that Ethan and Madison had moved in together already. Of course they had. People like Ethan didn't like being alone. They needed someone to pour reassurance into the hollow parts of themselves. And clearly Madison was willing. The news didn't hurt the way I expected it to. It didn't sting. It didn't shock. It didn't even anger me. Instead, it made something inside me settle, like a puzzle piece finally snapping into place. Of course he moved in with her. Of course he didn't hesitate. Of course his weekend disappearance had been a trial run for their little domestic fantasy. At least now I knew the full truth. He hadn't left to clear his head. He'd left to live a second life without the burden of explaining his choices to me. Knowing that strangely made things easier. Friends started inviting me out again. Dinner, wine nights, random weekend activities. For the first 2 months, I said no. I wasn't ready to pretend everything was fine. But slowly, the fog lifted. Slowly, I remembered what silence felt like when it wasn't filled with dread. Slowly, I remembered who I was before Ethan started shrinking my world down to the size of his excuses. I started walking in the evenings again. I picked up yoga classes on Saturdays. I began reading before bed, something I hadn't done in years, because Ethan always complained about the bedside lamp. One warm Friday night, my friend Emily coaxed me into joining her group at a rooftop bar. I expected to feel out of place or hollow, but instead, I felt normal, human, like someone who hadn't been waiting for a text that never came. A man struck up a conversation with me, polite, warm smile, easy laugh. He wasn't pushy. He wasn't trying too hard. He just asked about my job, my favorite travel spots, my go-to comfort foods. I told him lasagna. He said that was a red flag because his comfort food was cereal, and obviously I had better taste. It wasn't flirting, not really, just human connection. Still, I realized something important that night. I had space in my life again. Not the kind Ethan demanded, the kind I chose. A few days later, Emily said, "So, you're not seeing anyone yet, right?" I shook my head. "Well," she said, eyes sparkling, "when you're ready, the world's full of people who don't disappear for 3 days without explaining." I laughed for the first time in a long while. Last week, someone asked me directly, "Do you regret hiring the PI?" It was a coworker, someone who had heard whispers through our department's unofficial gossip pipeline. At first, I didn't know how to answer. Not because I doubted the decision, but because I realized how different things would have been if I hadn't hired him. Without those photos, without timestamps, without undeniable proof, Ethan would have spun the story like a master. He would have told friends and family that I was controlling, that I overreacted, that I ruined our marriage over insecurities, that he was the victim of my paranoia. And people would have believed him, because he was charming, because he could cry on cue, because every time I questioned him, he flipped it back onto me until I wondered if I'd imagined the distance growing between us. But the evidence had spoken for itself. He couldn't rewrite history when it was laid out in print. So I told my coworker the truth. "No," I said. "It wasn't extreme. It wasn't invasive. It was necessary." She nodded, thoughtful. "Still, that must have been hard." "It was harder living with someone who made me doubt my own instincts," I replied. On the first morning after the divorce was finalized, I sat on my couch with a cup of coffee and watched the sunlight spill across the hardwood floors. It felt quiet, but not empty, not lonely. Just honest. There's a strange peace in rebuilding your life with both hands, in choosing what stays and what goes, in deleting the stories someone else tried to force you into. I'm 35, divorced, starting over. Part of me always imagined starting over would feel like failure. But now, it feels like invention, like discovery, like finally stepping out into a room with all the lights turned on. Some nights, the house is still quiet, but it's my quiet. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet is kind.